Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very, very much for joining us at an extremely important meeting at an important moment. And we are very grateful to everybody for being here. Your presence in numbers and in the importance of the responsibilities that each of you hold is a very dramatic statement about the determination that we share to prevail in the fight against Daesh in defense of justice and peace. Now, I want to begin by thanking General Clapper for his leadership and for organizing the briefing this morning on the vital topic of information sharing. Thanks also to my colleague, Defense Secretary Ash Carter, who's going to bring us up to date on the military situation. Foreign Minister Jafari, welcome. Today's meeting is a logical complement to yesterday's pledging conference, during which we raised more than $2.1 billion in new money to assist in the stabilization in Iraq. And that is, as everybody knows, an absolutely critical effort, because as we take back territory, it is vital that the civilians, the citizens who move back into their homes, feel safe, are safe, have the services that they need, so that we don't have a revisitation of the very scourge that we have liberated them from. I also want to welcome Jürgen Stock, the Secretary General of Interpol, our coalition's 67th member, and a very valuable addition to the team. And finally, I want to thank Presidential Envoy Brett McGurk, who I think all of you will share with me the belief is doing a superb job of coordinating the diplomatic side of the coalition activities. So, my colleagues, I don't need to tell any of you that this meeting today is obviously timely. We're all aware of the terrible attacks that have taken place in recent weeks, perpetrated by Daesh directly, others by some people who claim to have been inspired by Daesh. But these savage assaults against civilians, against innocent women, men, children, against people of different nationalities, different religions, these are exactly why this coalition came together, and it is why this coalition is united and determined in our efforts to defeat Daesh and end this upheaval in our lives and in the order and structure that we have all worked so hard to achieve since the end of a world war. So let me be clear right up front. We are engaged in an historic effort. Nothing like this coalition has ever before been assembled. And we're not following a manual on anti-terrorist coalition building. We're writing it. We're daily working together, sharing ideas, and in fact learning more each day about a very different kind of challenge, the challenge of the last century, defined mostly by state-on-state competition for territory or power. This is non-state actors who are challenging the very foundation of that structure. Less than 2 years have passed since President Obama first summoned us into this coalition. At the time, I ask you to remember, Daesh was on a rampage, sweeping across parts of Syria and overrunning city after city in Iraq. You could see their Toyotas and their flags flying as they simply drove through villages, seemingly unstoppable. Commentators speculated about the possibility that the national borders of the region would be permanently erased and that Daesh might soon encircle and lay siege to Baghdad. The leaders of Daesh, enriched by their plunder and emboldened by success, even claimed to have established a caliphate and to be the rulers of all Islam. This morning, every single one of us awoke to a far different picture. Our coalition and our partners on the ground have driven Daesh out of nearly half the territory it once occupied in Iraq and 20% in Syria. Our airstrikes have degraded Daesh's leadership, put pressure on its supply lines, disrupted its ability to carry out offensive military operations. And security along the Syria-Turkish border has tightened, and we have squeezed Daesh's revenue streams by hammering its oil facilities, tanker trucks, and cash storage sites. Earlier this month, the Iraqi army took control of Kiraira Air Base, about 40 miles south of Mosul, by far the largest city remaining under Daesh control. In the face of such setbacks, the number of Daesh fighters has gone down by at least a third, recruiting has slowed, and defections have increased. So today, we can look forward, without exaggeration, to a time when Daesh is driven completely out of Iraq and Syria. Now, we know it isn't going to be easy. We know we have a lot of work to do. We know we're going to have to prepare carefully and move ahead relentlessly in close coalition with our partners in order to defeat Daesh in Mosul and Raqqa and the points in between. But make no mistake, the day that happens will mark a critical turning point in the fight against Daesh. Without a territorial base, Daesh will no longer be able to boast about a caliphate. Its narrative will change. It will have to change. And our narrative will change. It will no longer have a base of operations to which it can invite foreign terrorist fighters. The Daesh that has existed for the past 2 years will be no more once we arrive at that moment. But everybody here knows that Daesh is still going to be dangerous. Unlike some violent extremist groups, Daesh is resilient and realistic enough to know when it needs to change. So what we are seeing now is a concerted effort by Daesh to transform itself into a phony, from a phony state into some kind of global network whose only real purpose is to kill as many people as it can in as many places as possible. Stopping them under those circumstances remains a challenge. We understand that. The terrorists don't need a big budget to launch an indiscriminate attack, especially against a group of civilians at a soccer field, a nightclub, a bakery, a beachside resort, or on a train. They don't need to do a lot of planning if they have no wish to hide their identities or plot an escape or live to the next day. They don't need a vast organization if their strategy is to use social media to inspire people they don't even know to then carry out a murderous and suicidal attack. And I want to emphasize that Daesh is not pursuing a passive strategy. On the contrary, it is seeking to expand its reach by developing expertise in more languages and by establishing contacts in additional countries and regions. It is looking for areas of vulnerability, and it will be eager to try to exploit them. And that is why this will be an ongoing effort and challenge. What does it mean for us? Well, the answer begins with communication. That is why we started today with a briefing from General Clapper. Information sharing has always been a big part of what the coalition does, and it has played a key role in our effort to prevent foreign terrorist fighters from traveling to Syria and Iraq. But it is also clear now that we have to do more. The United States already has information sharing agreements with 55 international partners in order to identify and track suspected terrorists. At least 50 countries now provide profiles on foreign terrorist fighters to Interpol. And in recent years, 40 have approved or updated laws in their own countries to more effectively identify and be able to prosecute such fighters. Looking to the future, we have to keep breaking down the structural and the bureaucratic barriers in order to be able to exchange up-to-date information even more quickly and more widely, so that a border guard in southern Europe has the same data about a terrorist suspect as an airport security officer in Manila, or an FBI agent in Boston, or a domestic law enforcement advisor on the Arabian Peninsula. Our shared purpose has to be to connect the dots as rapidly as possible so that we are able to identify potential terrorists and intervene before they strike. Meanwhile, we must do all that we can as a global community to wage a holistic campaign against the root causes of violent extremism. Everybody here understands this challenge. We have country after country, excuse me, in which we have young people. In many countries, 60 to 65% is under the age of 30 or 35, certainly. 50% under the age of 21. And if they don't have jobs, if they don't have opportunity, if their political space is confined, then all of those things can feed extremism. We have to do more, all of us, to come together on a global basis to help change the future for some of those people and to deprive the violent extremists from the recruiting fields that they infest today. We have to do more to assist countries that need help in providing opportunity for their citizens. And I think everybody here has come to understand we don't do that as a matter of altruism or just goodness. We do it because it is also deeply in our security interest. There is no over there anymore, just over there somehow separate. We're all connected, and therefore we all need to work to protect each other's security by investing in each other's futures. We have to pursue efforts underway across the globe to counter Daesh's messaging and to emphasize that Daesh's many crimes have absolutely no basis whatsoever, no justification in religion, logic, history, or law. Now, these initiatives that we have undertaken to date are having an impact. They are having an impact. And a recent study by the U.S. Global Engagement Center indicates that anti-Daesh content on the internet, anti-Daesh content, now far exceeds pro-Daesh content. This was not the case even 6 months ago. We're aware that people can become radicalized for any number of reasons. And that is why it is so important that we tilt the odds further in the right direction by countering Daesh's hate-filled narratives with facts and by giving hope to people who are the most vulnerable and the most open to despair. So, my friends, the surviving leaders of Daesh want their followers to spill blood, to murder the innocent, and to inflict suffering. And never before in history has a summons of such comparable viciousness without any identifiable, more recognizable purpose been proclaimed on such a global basis. So it's only right that a unique coalition has come together to oppose that deadly summons. Unlike Daesh, our rallying cry is directed not at the worst instincts of human beings, but rather at what Abraham Lincoln called the better angels of human nature. And there is a reason for that. The countries and people represented in this room do not come here with an interest in hating. Our only interest is in justice and law and security and peace. And we want our citizens to be safe, our economies to grow, and our nations from across the globe to collaborate in solving problems that endanger us all. That stark contrast in goals spells the difference between Daesh and this coalition. It marks the dividing line between a modern form of barbarism and civilization itself, and it gives us all the motivation that we need to persist until we prevail. So I want to thank each and every one of you for the contributions your countries and or organizations are making to this coalition, and I urge you to have no doubt whatsoever that if we stay together, if we stay united, if we stay committed to this mission, if we continue to be creative, if we continue to develop our initiatives as we have, we will not only defeat Daesh, we will make our world a safer place. With that, it's my privilege to turn to Secretary of Defense.